Okay, we are going to be talking about the classical Eurasian cultural traditions. So this lecture is just about culture, predominantly religion, in Eurasia, so Europe and Asia, during the classical era. So we're mostly going to be talking about the belief systems in China, India, and then the empires in like Persia, Greece, and Rome. So our first question is, what different answers to the problem of disorder arose in classical China? So what you need to know about this is that most people believe that religions were formed originally because people needed a way to explain how the world worked. And they needed a way to explain why bad things happened and how they could prevent those bad things from ever happening again. And so historians believe that the very first civilizations started developing religion as a way of explaining, why do floods happen? Why do other natural disasters happen? Why do people die? What happens to people after death? That people wanted answers to those questions, and so they created religions as a way to do that. So this question is going to be talking about the ways that people in China tried to make sense of their life. And there are three different belief systems that they came up with. Now, it's important for you to know that we are going to call these belief systems and not religions, because none of these have a god in which the Chinese people were worshiping a god. So all of these are kind of moralistic ways of living. They have kind of rules for the Chinese people to follow, but they aren't necessarily worshiping a specific god or a group of gods. So the first belief system that arose during this time period in China would be legalism. So if you were a legalist, you believed that the reason bad things happen, the reason there's disorder and chaos in the world, is because people are stupid and naturally evil. We're just born evil. We don't know how to behave. So the only way that we can have order and get rid of this chaos is to have a very strong centralized government, or the state, and that they are supposed to make very strict laws to kind of keep people in line. And they need to have strict punishments for these laws. That way, when the naturally evil people step out of line, they will learn not to do so again. Okay, so legalists believe that the reason there's disorder, everyone's evil, and you need a strong government to make laws to put people back in check. The second belief system in China is Confucianism. So Confucius argued that the reason there's chaos and evil and disorder in the world is not because people are naturally evil, it's because people haven't been taught the correct moral way to live. So Confucius really stressed education and kind of living a moral lifestyle. He argued that if the people who are at the top of the class system, so say like the emperor, if the emperor behaves in a moral way where they are sincere, where they care about other people, then the emperor's subjects will start copying his behavior. So Confucius is making the argument that people just need to be taught how to behave, and then they will do so. So he really stresses things like filial piety. That's where children are taught to obey their parents without question. And he also stresses the 5 relationships, where everybody is born into 5 specific relationships. And you're either born into the part of the relationship where you are the superior one in the relationship, or you're born into the inferior position. So an example would be, one of the relationships that all people have is the relationship between a husband and a wife. He says eventually everyone will either fulfill the role of husband or wife, and the husband is superior. And so if the husband acts in a moral way and he cares about his wife and he treats her well, then his wife will also behave in a moral way. She'll copy his example, and she'll obey what her husband tells her to do. So Confucius really kind of stressed moralism and education, teaching people how to behave properly. The Taoists, they explained the reason why bad things happened in the world is because humans were in competition with one another. They say that the reason there's chaos is because humans are by nature trying to be better than somebody else. So the only way you can get rid of chaos is for all people to withdraw from politics and withdraw from social activities. So basically the idea is that he wanted people to withdraw from the public life, kind of live as a part of nature, live in very small communities where there's not going to be a lot of contact with other people, live simply where you're kind of growing your own food, you're not dependent on other people, have a limited government. So basically, the Taoist answer was kind of seclude yourself from as many humans as possible, and then you won't have this problem of competition. So up here at the right, we have this symbol for Taoism. It's the yin yang symbol. It's supposed to represent balance. So the Taoists believe that when you are one with nature, when you've withdrawn from social activity, that you will achieve balance. And so this is supposed to represent a Taoist kind of achieving that balance in their life where they don't have chaos. All right, our second question. Now we're moving to India. So it says Buddhism grew in India as a response to Hinduism. In what ways did Buddhism reflect and challenge Hindu principles? Okay, so in India you have two major religions, and these are religions because there are gods worshipped in both. So you have Buddhism and Hinduism. Hinduism will come first, and then Buddhism will kind of, as the question implies, grow in response to Hinduism. So how does Buddhism reflect Hinduism? So how are they similar? Both of them think that regular life is kind of an illusion, that your life is working towards this eventual heaven-like state. They both believe that you can be reborn, and your rebirth is dependent on your karma, so how good of a person you are in your current life. They both believe that you need to overcome your selfish desires in order to have good karma and be reborn into a better life. If you are a Buddhist or a Hindu, you'll both practice meditation, and they both believe that eventually you can be reborn into this kind of final class or caste where you can be released from rebirth. So they do believe that there's a point where you're going to stop being reborn and enter into heaven. But there are some ways that they differ. So things that Buddhism changed as it kind of developed out of Hinduism. Buddhists do not accept the Brahmins as a religious authority. So in Hinduism, if you are a Brahmin, you are a part of the priestly caste. That is the highest caste you can be as a Hindu, and those are going to be the people who are reborn into heaven. The Buddhists don't believe this. They don't think that you have to be a certain gender or occupation to get into heaven. So that's down here where it says they reject the caste system. So Buddhism was really appealing to people who were at the bottom of the caste system and to women, because they were typically told in Hinduism that they are not going to be able to be reborn into heaven. They're going to have to be reborn into a new life and hope that they're born into a higher caste and as a man. So Buddhism was something that appealed to them because it said, no, that's not true. You can be reborn again and be released from this world and enter into their heaven-like state without having to be a part of a higher caste. And Buddhism also doesn't really care that much about the creation of the world or whether or not gods exist. So in Hinduism, there are, some say, hundreds of gods, whereas in Buddhism, originally there weren't any gods. Now, if you Buddhism is kind of morphed, and Buddha himself has become kind of a godlike figure that Buddhists worship. So, but originally Buddhism didn't really focus on any gods or worship of the gods. All right, question 3. What aspects of Zoroastrianism and Judaism subsequently found a place in Christianity and Islam? So Zoroastrianism was the religion of the Persian Empire. And so they had a lot of beliefs that kind of bled over into Judaism since the Hebrews eventually became a part of the Persian Empire. So you have the people in Zoroastrianism believed in God versus some kind of evil counterpart. They had a different name for him. In Judaism and Christianity, his name is Satan. Zoroastrianism also believes in kind of a last judgment, and after that time period your bodies will be resurrected. They believe that there's going to be a point where good will conquer evil, and that you're going to have salvation and the world is going to be remade. So those are all things that are passed on to Judaism. So Judaism will take those and then kind of add to it. So Jews also believe in a heaven and a hell. And then they view God as kind of a singular, so that's a new idea. There's one God, not many. That he's separate from nature, so it's not like a sun god and a wind god. He's just God and he created nature. That he's engaged in history, so he cares about the people that he rules over, and he's going to affect historical events, and that this God is concerned with justice and moral righteousness. And all of these things, so all the bullets under Zoroastrianism, all the bullets under Judaism, all of those eventually make their way into Christianity and Islam. So you can see how religions can affect one another. So Zoroastrianism, Judaism, and Christianity and Islam were all kind of located within the same regions. So they would have been well aware of each other's beliefs, and that's how they're kind of able to bleed over and share some ideas. And our last question, what are the distinctive features of the Greek intellectual tradition? So Greece during this time period, they did believe in like the Greek gods. So I'm sure you've heard stories of Mount Olympus and Zeus and all of those gods, that kind of thing. But as the classical era goes on, a lot of people are going to start challenging whether or not those gods actually exist. Because if you've ever read any of the stories, the Greek gods are very emotional and they're kind of unreasonable, and they make terrible things happen at kind of their will, and for no real reason. And so you had a lot of philosophers in Greece start to say, maybe this doesn't make sense. Maybe these gods don't actually exist, because Poseidon causing this massive typhoon just because he felt like it doesn't really seem logical. So you have this growing group of people who start challenging the idea that these Greek gods exist. And the way they do that is they're going to emphasize logic and reason. They're going to encourage people to question the wisdom of religious elders. They're going to have them ask questions. Do you have proof? That kind of thing. And they're going to be really enthusiastic about humans were born with the capability of reasoning and rationalization, and that humans don't necessarily need a god to depend on. And so the belief in these gods is kind of unnecessary, and that Greek philosophers kind of made the argument that people invent gods because they needed something to explain the world, whereas humans are born with enough reason to explain the world all by themselves, and they don't need to necessarily worship these gods who may or may not exist. So that's it for Eurasian cultural traditions. If you have any questions or comments, bring them to class and we will discuss.